Hello everyone, I'm Matt Miller, and this is my Procreate 4.1 demo for the piece I call the Siphon Witch. Yeah, she's scary. This piece came about as an effort to draw more females, because generally I suck at drawing female anatomy. It just happens. I have all these cool, amazing ideas for these female characters, but I can't draw them. And it sucks, so I'm working on that. It's just a little something to work on me. I suck when it comes to drawing female anatomy, so this is practice more than anything, or it started off as practice, but eventually it became a piece of its own. As you can see, I just started drawing just female body, and then I put like this really crazy grin and maybe some hair on there, but then I was like, all right, it's time to go to bed. So I went to sleep, and in a lucid state of dreaming, I saw this witch with like all this crazy looking armor on her shoulder pads and this flowing brown robes. And I woke up and I was like, I gotta draw this. So I drew it really fast and then went back to sleep. So yeah, she's like a witch, like nun type of thing. I imagine this character would fit into Mike Henry's A Village Corrupted universe. Her backstory would be maybe, at a young age, she was enslaved and forced to do like some dark, necrotic magic that twisted her. Maybe she didn't really have a life before then, and so like growing up and becoming a woman, she didn't really have a childhood really. She's just always been forced to have magic, and she doesn't really know anything else. So she's just corrupted and twisted, soul. Like it sucks. It would suck to be her, but at the same time, she's also evil. So you have that, and it's not like she had the choice to be evil. She's just evil by the nature of her being enslaved and forced to learn dark magic. And I imagine that this dark magic, kind of like the disciple piece, the dark magic would take away her vision. So that's the reason for her ocular, face thing would be she can't see. So why the hell have her show her eyes? Yeah. Also, a part of it could be, if this was a video game, she could be a boss, maybe not the boss at the very end, but a boss. And she would, once her health gets down to, 20% or whatever, the face mask thing comes off, and it's just hideous and gross and freaking scary. And then that's when the real battle begins. Also, as a gameplay thing, maybe she, while you're fighting her, she's slowly siphoning your health and restoring your own health. So it's kind of like a war of attrition, I guess. But as the hero, or as heroes, you would eventually beat her by either doing more damage to her than she's doing damage to you, or by healing yourself. Which I don't know if any of Mike Henry's characters can heal. Just looking at it from a game idea, just a gameplay perspective, maybe the Flayer can, suck some blood or take some potions or whatever, or the monk might be able to heal people. I don't know. Maybe it's not even a thing. I don't know. It's not my IP. I wish it was my IP. I wish I was involved in it. You hear that, Mike? I wish I was in it. But anyways, I'll just keep drawing characters for it, and eventually there'll be things, okay? But yeah, that would be the gameplay aspect of this character. Some of the things with this character I just knew that I wanted from the get-go. I knew I wanted the face piece. I knew I wanted gauntlets, or not gauntlets, pauldrons with spikes. And I knew I wanted to have her sucking someone's soul out. But those didn't really come about as I don't know. Now, I won't say as natural as I wanted it to be, but it didn't come out as smoothly as I wanted it to be. There was a lot of iterations, especially with the spikes on the shoulder pads. The shoulder pads themselves, the placing of the victim that's getting his soul sucked out. It was a little bit iffy. I know it was a little bit sketchy going in. I eventually figured it out. So if you're been following me on any of the social media channels or anything like that, you'll know that I'm a soldier in the United States Army, and I don't do art for a living. I'm a linguist, and right now I'm in language class, and I don't get a lot of time to myself, but I get a few breaks here and there between language hours, and that's when I've done most of the drawing for this past week. The rough was done in one night, and then everything else was kind of, done throughout the week during those breaks. A lot of times it would be like after PT, before work, doing a little bit of line work there, and then doing some like the 10 minutes in between class hours, and I get about an hour and some change for lunch, and a lot of that was spent eating, but also eating and drawing, because you can take an iPad Pro wherever you want. So I just take the iPad Pro with me and just draw when I get chances to do it here and there. A lot of the difficult parts of this piece, I'd probably say, was the placing of the hands, not necessarily drawing the hands themselves, because drawing hands really isn't that hard. It just takes a little bit of time to figure out the anatomy. But placing of the hands was difficult, and also the perspective of the spikes. That was probably the hardest thing. There's some chains on this character, and I didn't think the chains were very difficult. I hate drawing chains because there's a lot of detail in there, and they all got to be interconnected, and there's a lot of places where you can just screw up and botch a piece just with chains, and they got to look natural. And I don't really like drawing chains, but the chains weren't that hard in this piece. The hardest part, hands and spikes, definitely. Also, a note for this piece, I used the fat pencil, which I don't have a video for because I didn't make the fat pencil. Mike Henry did it, and I'm just using it to copy that style. But you can Google or you can YouTube search fat pencil Mike Henry, and you can watch his video. He has a fat pencil, and he shows how to make it. So I used the fat pencil for this. I'm not a huge fan of using the fat pencil just because you have to go over your lines a lot in order to get the right look. At least if you're trying to thicken up some lines, and you thicken up lines in order to show depth, and also in order to show prominence of certain parts, or separation. So that's, if you're doing that, you kind of have to go over your lines a couple of times. There's a couple of workarounds to that, which I might do a video on later on. But to do this style, fat lines. Usually in other pieces, I just use some kind of pen. I think I use a technical pen. But for this one, trying to copy that style, fat pencil. So let's talk about the inspiration behind this piece. The inspiration came from, obviously, A Village Corrupted, but also 3 other main things came from the Batman Who Laughs. So if you read that comic, you'll know the Batman Who Laughs is, he just looks metal as F, and he's got like an eyepiece that covers his face, and he's always smiling, so his mouth's always open. And he just looks creepy, but basically he's Batman that goes insane and becomes the Joker, kind of. It's like if Batman and the Joker became the same character. So he's inspired by that. He's inspired by wizards from the Destiny IP. The wizards are a part of the Hive, and they're just scary and creepy, and they can summon thralls, which are basically kind of like minions. They're really creepy looking. They're just creepy, scary. Don't like them. Avoid them at all costs. And also the Mouth of Sauron. The Mouth of Sauron was always really freaky looking. He's got his eyes covered up as well, and his mouth is just like, there's stuff coming out of it, and his teeth are all rotten, and that's kind of the inspiration behind her teeth and look. Now with the shoulder pads, I went through a couple of iterations, as you can see while you're watching the video of, you know, I draw a couple of different versions of it, and I don't really like them. I also tried drawing some kind of gauntlets or bracers, and I didn't really like that. Eventually decided, you know what, I'm just going to leave them off. It would probably distract from her general appearance anyways. So eventually I go with these huge pauldrons, or yeah, pauldrons or shoulder pads, and they look really, really good. Or at least I think so. I think they look pretty cool. They're very stylized. They fit the genre. So let's talk about some of the elements that made it into this piece. So at first you saw the lock going on her collar piece. You know, that was kind of to evoke the idea of the occultist from Mike Henry's stuff. But then I started drawing these chains on the pauldrons, on the shoulder pads, and I was like, maybe I should put chains on her collar. So I got rid of the chains from the shoulder pads and I put them on the collar. And chains they're not difficult to draw, they're just tedious. And that's something that I struggle with when I'm drawing, is drawing things that are tedious. Like, they look really good, but I don't like drawing them. And in fact, I've talked about this before with like my wife and with a couple of my friends that you know, that I work closely with, is that I don't like drawing a lot of tedious stuff, even though it looks really cool. I just like the way it comes out at the end. So if I could just like not draw stuff and just think of stuff and it just appeared, that'd be cool. And that's sort of a psychological, like, yeah, you don't like drawing, you just like the stuff that you make after it's done. And yeah, I don't really think that way, like, that's just me joking around. I love drawing, but sometimes I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's super deep. Like, he doesn't like drawing, but he likes what he draws. Just something to think about out there in internet land. You know, think about what you're drawing, think about if you actually like it and enjoy it. I do. It was just a thought experiment, if you will. Drawing the spikes on her eyepiece was really difficult. I'm just trying to get the perspective and nail it down. There's a couple of tricks I used to get the perspective right. I don't know if they worked, because I don't think the perspective turned out accurate at all. But I think it looks, in general, I think it looks okay. It gets the idea across. The ones on the left side of the page are sticking out a little bit too far than the ones on the right side. Or, yeah, and that's just me griping about my own art. But I think for the most part it looks good. Here I go trying to do the lock again, because I thought maybe I could make it work. Maybe it would still look all right. But you'll see in a second, I just erase it and then I put on chains. And the chains weren't that hard to do. The chains were just drawing a square or drawing a rectangle and then drawing a smaller rectangle inside of it, warping it a little bit, and then duplicating it a few times so that way it looks like it's hanging between her breasts. That was it. Not a lot to it, and you'll see that in a second after I draw this lock all the way out and then erase it. Such a waste of time. But it was fun. It was a fun practice, I guess. Maybe. Nah, it looks stupid. I don't know what else to say about that. It was just a dumb thought experiment. Here I am drawing the chains. When I'm doing all my roughs and I'm doing like practice, I guess practice drawings over my drawing, I'll switch to a darker red, and that just helps me not make things black. I don't like black on white a lot, just because it's very stark. And I know a lot of people like that, but I like to use a little bit of red. Sometimes I'll go with blue, but most of the times I'll use red as my rough. And it just helps me ease into the picture, I guess, if that makes any sense. A lot of people use red for their sketches and their like actual sketchbooks. I actually use regular pencils, like mechanical pencils, nothing special. Actually, lately I haven't used a traditional medium in a long well, not ever, but in a long time. I just use the iPad. It's great. So here goes the final shoulder piece. I like the way the spikes came out. Spikes came out on the top, and also the spikes on, the coming out of the side. They look really cool. I duplicated it and put it on the other side, shrank it a little bit, and then used that as a starting piece or a starting point for the other shoulder pad. And I use like a circular tool to help place the spikes, and then do the spikes from there, doing the perspective. Perspective sucks with spikes. Excuse me. They suck well, I shouldn't say they suck, but they take a lot of effort with spikes, especially if you're doing round ones, because not only do you have to change the roundness, but you also like have to decide, okay, where is the center point of this circle, and then where does it follow up, where does it come to a point. It's basically making cones, and cones are a little bit more difficult than drawing pyramids. And in my opinion, pyramids are super easy, and I didn't make these pyramid spikes because I'm an idiot. I made them cone spikes. Whatever. They still look cool. So here I am drawing in some red to get myself some perspective lines, and trying to get everything to be on the same plane, the same page. There's not really much else to talk about over here. I already talked about my gripes. Talked about my complaints about drawing in general. I sound like I'm just whining a lot, but I love drawing. But now I'm all thinking about it and shit. Yeah. So, on a different topic, on a side note, I really think that I should start doing this for a living. Like, I really want to draw for a living. I love drawing. I wish this was my job. And I know saying that after just talking about how much I hate drawing and I like what comes out of drawing, I really do love drawing, and I really wish this was what I did for a living. Right now, I'm in the Army. I'm employed by the government, and they pay me well. They keep me well fed, and they keep me clothed, and they're taking care of me. But it's just not my passion, you know. And you gotta have a passion for your life. And I love the people I work with, but man, if I could just draw all day long, that'd be great. That'd be amazing. Okay, sidebar over. The spikes are almost done. Yay! One thing that I always forget about doing, or not that I forget about doing it, but I always remember at the very end is, so I nearly forget, but one thing I don't remember until the very end is putting damage on things. Especially with this genre, this piece, it's got to have damage. All of Mike Henry's pieces are they're very damaged, they're very worn, especially with this Village Corrupted IP. Everything's got to have a little bit of character. It's got to be in this world that is very brutal. So here you see me, I'm noodling in some damage, some wear and tear to this stuff, and it really it sets this piece up for maximum success. It looks so good with all the damage on it. When I get to the guy that's laying on the ground, it wasn't super difficult. At first I wanted to have like some kind of like spear coming through him, but eventually I just decided, nah, scrap that. I'll just make him lay on the ground and make him all bloody. Going through, at this point I'm just putting in a lot of the thicker lines in, and drawing in some shadows. I don't really like doing that so much, but in this type of piece, it works in to just lightly shade in shadows. Here I am roughing in where I'm going to place the old dude that's getting his soul ripped out. I'm not really too keen on drawing people in profile. It's just not what I like to do. I like to draw 3/4 image, or quarter image, not 3/4, quarter image or draw them straight on. I'm not really good at drawing profiles, but I think this one looked alright, especially his teeth and his open mouth. And then I eventually change it where I tilt him a little bit more so he's looking up at her. She's not looking at him because she just senses the soul. She's just ripping the soul. But imagine he just, fell in the middle of this battle. And he's still clinging to life. He's still, bleeding out. He's in pain. And here comes this witch that just starts, as she's coming closer, you just see her mouth is just, she's hungry. And she sees you, but she doesn't really see you. She senses you. And you see her, so you're just staring and your eyes get wider as she comes closer and closer. And as she steals your soul. Like, ugh, freaky. And it's Halloween time right now. Everything's leaning towards that genre. Everything's getting a little freaky. But yeah, like, I could just imagine that happening. It's just, ugh, freaky. I gave him a medieval mullet for his hair. Just a nondescript mullet looking thing. Not much to say about that. The only thing I really would like to point out right now is that I mess up the lines on the hair and the finger. I make her finger overlap his hair, which makes her hand bigger than his head, which wasn't my intent. My intent was to have her finger behind his hair, and eventually I correct it, but you'll see it right here where it just looks stupid. But yeah, the mullet looks really cool. Why can't we have medieval mullets anymore? Something to talk about at a different time. Now, granted, I wouldn't have a mullet, but it'd be nice to see other people out there with medieval mullets. And it just looked cool, right? Just looked awesome. Now I'm noodling in a little bit of detail here and there, and I tried to do a spear and I decided against it. It didn't really fit. It would have detracted too much from her. So let's talk about flatting for a little bit. Once I finish up all the lines, I duplicate them, and that's where I do my flats. Basically, I duplicate the lines. I don't combine those duplications. I turn off one layer, and then I use the new duplicated layer, and I erase everything inside those thick lines, so that way I can fill it in black. And that's to give me a base flat to work on. And with the flat pencil, or with the fat pencil, it's a little bit more difficult to do the flatting process. I mean, you can certainly do it. It certainly works. It just takes a little bit more time. As with all good things, they come with time. But then, so I take the whole master flat black that I filled in, and then I go to the color shift, and I shift it up from, or I change the brightness from black up to a little bit of a lighter gray. And then I use the original lines and I set them to soft light. And that's to help me color in the piece. I knew originally that I wanted to do a brown robe, darker-ish gray for the metal, really lighter gray for the spikes, and I wanted her to be pale and just sickly looking. And I think it turns out pretty well for that. As far as the dude that's dying, there's nothing special that's going on with there. He's just wearing some blue clothes and he's got brown hair. I don't know. There's a little bit of special stuff that's going on with the blood for his face. The blood was done with it's like I drew on the blood, and then I used the smear tool to smear it around, and then just a little bit of smearing. And then after that, I take a chalk, and I use like the chalk to erase. Or it's like a chunkier chalk, but I use it to erase at it, and it almost looks like the blood has dried and it's flaking off. For the hands and for the blush and for the nose, it's just a red set to, it's not set to multiply, but it's lowered in opacity. For the stuff that's dripping out of her eye and coming out of her mouth, that's like a mauve color, and then it's lowered in opacity and set to multiply. Teeth are yellow. Eventually I paint her fingernails like a purplish, but then I set them to make them more brownish yellow, kind of like her teeth. And then her lipstick is set to a mauve as well, but then it's set to multiply and then not quite as lowered in opacity. Putting on the highlight colors, or the highlights, is just whites. That's all they are. So the spikes are a little bit of a more brighter white. I think they're lowered to like 80% opacity. And then the rest of the highlights are set to like maybe 40% opacity, but they're all white. The lines on here, if you're paying attention, they were changed from black lines to a purple. So I set them to like a lighter purple, maybe a light mauve or grayish mauve, and then I set them to multiply and then lower their opacity. That's how I get that the colored lines look. It's like very, very subtle. The background popped in randomly there. That's not the final background. I go in and I change it. The background was used for a different piece that I started working on that I never finished. And he was going to be like it's going to be in the same universe, but he was going to be like a guard that was like guarding this fenced in hell region. But I figured, it worked for her. I can just put her in that background. It fits. It works. The shadows, there's not really a lot of shadows on here, a lot of drop shadows. It's mainly just blacks lowered in opacity and then used to show a little bit of push and pull for different pieces. For under this pauldron, there's a little bit of a drop shadow. And then there's a little bit on her arm and on the robe, but just a very, very little bit. I think I might have put a little bit under her eyes, but not enough where you really notice it. And now I'm just coloring everything in. Here's the difficult part, was drawing the ethereal essence coming out of his mouth. It's hard to make that work in such a gray and dark looking piece without it looking forced. I know Mike Henry does it very well for his pieces. He did it really well for the Craven Templar, and he did it really, really well for the Disciple. But yeah, I struggled with it. It was like, do I want it to be kind of light coming out of him? Do I want it to be like a light ribbon coming out of his mouth? Or do I want it to be like a smoke coming out? Eventually, it kind of like merged the ideas where it was like a ribbon, but it was also a ribbon of smoke. I think it looked alright. I'm not 100% satisfied with it, and I might readdress it at a different time. Or if I were to like work on this project and flesh it out, I might work on it a little bit more. But for right now, it suits its needs basically. And now I'm putting a little bit of a dark wash over everything to kind of darken the piece. Here I'm working on the essence that's coming out of his mouth. Put my signature in there, and then I think I changed out the background because it's looking way too dark. And I don't want it to be really, really dark, but I changed it out in a second here. There we go. And there's the finished piece. There's the lines, black and white, so you can get a look at that. And if you search my social media, you can find them if you wanted to color over them. And here's the final colored piece. I think it turned out really well. Thanks for watching, for listening to me ramble. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.